Hey there, welcome to Synth Seeker. My name's Luke. I was hanging out on Discord when someone asked the question, hey, how do I make this sound, and included this clip. So at first it seemed trivial, right? It's like, that sounds like random sine wave, with some processing on it. But after listening a bit more closely, there was some interesting corners in the sound, right? It's that bleepy bloopy synth line, sure. Sounds like it's a sine or a triangle. That's fine. And it seems random, but it's mostly random, right? So there's pure random, there's pseudo-random, and then there's this in-between sort of place. It sounds like random rhythm, but it's not quite the distribution. If it was truly random, there'd be huge, there would potentially be large sections of nothing and then large sections of too much. So if you've ever played with generative software, making music, you'll know that things that are purely random don't always sound that good. More often than not, they don't sound that good when they're purely random. You want to take slices of things that are perhaps randomly generated and then repeat them because repetition validates, right? So it sounded like, almost random rhythm, but not quite. It sounded more like a drunkard's walk, right? Which you may or may not have heard of, or a woggle behavior, like a woggle bug behavior. And if you want more detail on what drunken walk and woggle behavior is, there are links in the description. Basically, it's random, but with a particularly pleasing sort of distribution of slow and fast hit groups versus rests and things like that. And then the notation is random, but not incoherently random. So if you listen to it, you also notice that the random notes do tend to fall on the chord harmony that's being played in the background. So it sounds like it's randomly played, but it's not. So it's probably prepared or something like that. But I was thinking it would be interesting to build something that kind of simulates that. So yeah, something that does maybe a drunkard's walk sort of rhythm and a note selection that's constrained to the chord that's playing behind it or the harmony of the other instruments. Interesting challenge. So I took some time and I built this little Max for Live plugin that illustrates this, and I think it works pretty well. And so I'm going to demo it here. And while we talk about it, I'll explain how you would do this in hardware, because for my modular days, this is totally a doable thing. It's really doable on modular synths. On sort of encapsulated monolithic synths, maybe less so. But I think we can do it in software. I'm going to do it in software, demonstrate it here. And then if you're working in hardware, especially if you have a modular, go nuts. Try this. I think you'll like it. So you can download the Max for Live plugin from my website. It's free. It's not super awesome or professional. It looks kind of bad. I don't skin things. It's there. So links in the description, go grab it. We'll talk about how to download it and install it in a second. It's really trivial, but you do need Ableton and Max for Live, which means probably Ableton Suite for most people, because I don't think anybody buys Max for Live as a standalone anymore. And whatever, let's keep going. Let's see how this works. Okay, if you click the link in the description, you will be taken to my website. Here there is a file here, drunknotes.amxd.zip. You want to download that. Eventually you'll get a zip file you can open up. This AMXD file is a Max for Live device. You just drag it into your project. You can go into the current project folder or put it somewhere where it makes sense in your user library. Okay, now I've already done that. Once you have it in, you create a MIDI track. Okay, I've got this track, Drunk Synth. Let's go over what's in the strip here. We start with our Drunk Notes plugin. That's the thing that we just created. We'll talk about how to use that in a second, but what else is also in here? There is a note length plugin. We'll get into why. You'll want a scale plugin if you're going to constrain it to a particular scale, and then an instrument of some kind. I've got a simple analog in here that's just making a little sine wave output, a little echo, a little hybrid reverb. And really, that's all that you need. So let's take a look at the plugin. The plugin requires that the transport be running. Okay, so my transport's running here, that's fine. Essentially, if you turn on by clicking the button labeled Give Me Drunken Notes, it starts emitting drunken notes. Okay, now what happens is, the way it works is when it's running, this plugin emits MIDI notes from 0 to 127, the full range, by default. What you can do is configure with these three knobs The lowest knob is for setting the lowest note in the range. It defaults to C3. That's fine. But you can set it to, play starting at a very low note or at a very high note. It's up to you. The octave knob specifies how many octaves of range you want it to emit notes within. So in this case, starting from C3, and we've got 3 on the octave style, it will emit notes from C3 through C6. Okay. And then the scatter knob is how large the step size is for the drunken walk. Okay, now the drunken walk, rather than it being metronomic, like a normal person walking would be 1 foot in front of the other at regular intervals, regular beats, 1, 2, 3, 4. A drunken walk works differently. It basically says, all right, here's your first step. Then I'm going to pause for a certain amount of time, and then I'm going to play the next note that I'm going to select that's within the scatter distance. Okay, so if this is set for 2, what will happen is it'll pick a note, it'll play that note, and then when it goes to pick the other note, it has to be either +2 or -2 from that note. So if it's a C was the note it just played, the next note it will play will be a D or a C sharp, right? Or down, it'll play a B or a B flat, and it's going to choose one of those randomly, but it's only going to go that far. Then it's going to wait for an random-ish interval. We'll get into that in a minute, but it's going to wait, and then it's going to select the next note based on the one that it just took. So if it went up to a D, now it's going to potentially go to an E flat or an E, or it could go back down, C sharp or C, right? And so you get this meandering walk, and that's just shown here on this little table, right? So with a setting of 2 at C3 with, we'll say, 1 octave of range, we turn it on. And you can see its path in the table. It's kind of stumbling around. Now if we increase the scatter, actually let's increase the octave range. Let's say 3 octaves of range, which is the default. Let's up our scatter a bit. And this is getting to be more like what we had in the example from that clip at the beginning of this. And really, that's how the plugin works. Now, it is sending out chromatic notes, and they're coming out as plucks, really short, like 60. I think it's only a 60 or 120 ticks long, very short. So we use a note length plugin to give it a little length if we want, right? If we turn this off, it sounds more like this. All right. Then we use a scale plugin to constrain it to a particular scale. All right, so in this case, we're doing this minor pentatonic scale. So it is sending out chromatic notes across the spectrum, across the whole of the 0 to 127 Midi note values. But it's being forced to constrain to a minor pentatonic scale. And you can set whatever scale you want here, right? And then it's going into our analog, and then our delay and our reverb. This is really nice for making those sort of spacey sounds like the example we heard at the beginning of this video. Now, there's one more feature here. If this is running, if you play some notes on your controller here, you'll see that the keyboard lights up. So I'm holding down C and G on my controller. That's constraining this even further. So now drunk notes will only emit C's and G's starting at C3 within the 3 octave range, and sort of jump back and forth. And scatter really doesn't really mean that much in this case. But if you wanted your drunk notes to follow a chord progression, you could set up a clip on this channel, and basically it would, the chords in that clip would feed into this and constrain it. So we can go from CG, right? Now, these notes are also being constrained by this pentatonic scale. So let me turn this off. So now we're hearing D minor, because that's the chord I'm holding down. If I change that to C, right? So you have a little bit of control with drunken notes here, all right? And if I take my hand off the controller, we're going to get chromatic notes, right? And that's when you would use a scale plugin to keep it in key with whatever piece of music you're working with, if you choose. All right. So that's how this plugin works. Now, what if you wanted to do this not in a DAW, right? What if you wanted to do this with your modular? You can do that, right? You need a few things. You need something that will do drunken walk style triggers. Okay, now the way I used to do that on my modular was I used a module called Monome's Teletype. Absolutely one of my most favorite modules as far as sequencing voltages and sequencing gates. And it has a drunk function built into it, and it'll give you drunken triggers or drunken, you could do drunken walk notation, pitches as well. What else would work? The make noise woggle bug, right? It's not specifically drunken, using a drunken walk algorithm. It's using a woggle algorithm, which is a little different, but just as sort of pleasing to the mind, to the ear. You can use the woggle bug for both gates. It'll do woggle style bursts for like gate bursts, clock bursts, and it will give you woggle style CV out for note selection as well. There are others, and I'm sure there's a ton of them now. I mean, because I'm about 2 years out of date for modular. And then in the modular space, you're going to want a note quantizer, right? And those are, I think everyone and their cousin makes a quantizer of one kind or another, a pitch quantizer. Feed it a voltage and it will quantize it to a particular scale or, to a set of notes that you can set or whatever. So you would take something like the Teletype, do drunken walk gates out of it, possibly drunken walk pitches. You could certainly do both of those with make noise woggle bug. You would feed that into a CV quantizer, and then that would give you your note CV and your gate stuff. There are probably, I'm certain there are other ways. How would you do it? So in your explorations, either in modular or if you've got desktop synths, monolithic desktop synths, or maybe you're doing it in another kind of software, that's fine, something other than live. Write a comment, share in the comments what you do to achieve this sort of effect, and let us know. Okay. Now that's sort of how to use drunk notes sort of inline, right? So we've got this single strip with our note generator, some of our transformation stuff like note length and the scale plugin into our synth, and then we listen to it. Now, what if you want to capture that, right? Well, let's take it to the next level, right? You can do that by splitting behavior. I've got 2 tracks here, okay? I've got the drunk generator, which has our drunken notes plugin. We've got our note length. We've got our minor pentatonic scale, okay? And then we've got the drunk recorder, which contains our synth and our effects for our audio effects, okay? And the drunk generator is feeding into the track in of drunk recorder, okay? So the way this works is if I turn this on, and then I arm, okay, I have a slightly different setting on the analog synth, right? But this is running at this point. What you can do is capture it. These notes are coming in, so record a clip. All right, we'll let that run for a bit. Capture a few notes. We're going to stop it. Turn off our transport. We'll turn off drunk notes, and we'll go look at this clip. All right, so here's our clip, right? And what was the scale we were using? We were using minor pentatonic, so let's constrain this to, say, minor pentatonic. All right, so here are the notes. Now, as we said, random is good. Pseudo-random, drunken style or woggle style random can be better. Doesn't have to be, not always. But we've recorded that. Now what we would really want to do, and where you're going to get the most value out of this, is probably in repeating it. So let's take a sub-selection of this. We'll do this. And we're just going to repeat this. So by the third time that we've looped through this, you can feel the groove. Now it's a little weird here in the middle where we've got a lot of stuff firing at once. Okay. But what you can do in a case like that is, let's select all these notes. Let's make them a little smaller so they're not quite so overlapping. All right. And let's quantize them. We'll quantize them to 16th notes. And listen again. And there you go. So you could take randomness, sample it, quantize it, and find the beauty in it. Let's zoom out. Let's pick a different section. Let's move this. Let's pull this one. Set the start at the beginning. Right? Let's do something a little smaller. Let's just do this one. We'll do 1 bar's worth. So that's another option for you, right? You can take the output of drunk notes, constrain it to a key, or you hold down some chords, do it through a chord progression, but capture that into a clip, then quantize it to 16th notes or 8th notes or whatever you like, whatever's appropriate for your tempo, and then look within it for patterns that you find pleasing. Let's pick one over here. How about this one? Start at the beginning. Let's pull it out a bit. All right. If you've seen any of the other videos on melody and harmony, right? You don't necessarily want notes playing all the time. You want these gaps so that you can breathe in them. But, you know, explore, have fun with it. And really, that's about it. Again, I'm going to say it again. In the comments, please let us know how you achieve drunken notes, drunken woggle behavior. And, you know, link to pieces of music that you make that make use of it. I'd love to hear it. And I'm sure other people would too. So go ahead and share. And that will do for now, I think. I thank you for your time, and as always, you have been watching Synth Seeker. Have a great day.